The Russia-Ukraine war is entering another dangerous phase. As Moscow intensifies its aerial assault on Ukraine, Kyiv is striking back deep inside Russian territory, targeting critical energy and military-linked infrastructure. And now, the war is spilling into a new and potentially more dangerous confrontation. Russia has issued a stark warning to Britain, suggesting that UK facilities producing drones for Ukraine could face attacks from unknown sources. A threat that comes after London agreed to share classified technical information with Kyiv to help Ukraine produce long-range missiles. The message from Moscow is clear. Russia sees Britain's growing military support for Ukraine as direct involvement in the war. And that raises a bigger question. Could the battlefield in Ukraine begin to stretch far beyond Ukraine's borders? While Russia continues its campaign against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure, Ukraine has stepped up its own long-range drone strikes against targets inside Russia. One of the latest reported targets was the Afipsky oil refinery in Russia's southern Krasnodar Krai. The facility was reportedly hit during an overnight Ukrainian drone attack. A fire broke out at the refinery, while falling drone debris also hit the nearby Afipskaya railway station. According to Russian regional authorities, 2 people were killed and 2 others injured. The full extent of the damage at the refinery was not immediately clear. Ukraine has repeatedly targeted Russian oil refineries and energy facilities, seeking to disrupt the infrastructure that supports Moscow's war effort. And Afipsky is no ordinary target. The refinery has a design processing capacity of around 6.25 million tons of crude oil a year, and is reported by Ukrainian officials to be involved in supplying fuel to the Russian military. Ukraine has also reported strikes on gas processing infrastructure in Russia's Astrakhan region. The attacks point to a broader Ukrainian strategy, hitting the fuel and energy network that keeps Russia's military machine running. But as Kyiv strikes deeper into Russia, Moscow is responding with its own wave of attacks. Russia says it has targeted Ukrainian military infrastructure, logistics hubs, fuel facilities and ports. Among the areas under pressure are Zaporizhzhia in southeastern Ukraine and the Odesa region on the Black Sea. Moscow claims its forces targeted a dry cargo vessel inside the port of Odesa, alleging that it had delivered military supplies to Ukraine. Russia also claims strikes hit fuel storage tanks, warehouses and port infrastructure at the nearby port of Pivdeny. According to Moscow, some of those facilities were being used to store military equipment and supplies destined for Ukrainian forces. Russia's apparent objective is to disrupt the movement of military cargo from the moment it enters Ukraine through the Black Sea to the point where it reaches the battlefield. That makes Odesa more than just another target. It is increasingly becoming a pressure point in the wider Russia-Ukraine war. If Russia can damage ports, warehouses, rail links, and logistics hubs, it could make it harder and more expensive for Ukraine to move supplies across the country. The battle, therefore, is not simply about capturing territory. It is also about choking supply lines. And Ukraine's ability to keep its Black Sea trade and logistics network functioning could become critical in the months ahead. The latest escalation comes as Ukraine marked its Independence Day. Air raid alerts and explosions were reported across several Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv. Russia says its wider campaign is focused on military targets, defense industries, energy infrastructure, and command facilities. But as the attacks intensify, civilian areas, and critical infrastructure continue to face the consequences of the war. And now, Britain has entered the center of the confrontation in a new way. Britain has agreed to share classified information on components of the Scalp long-range missile with Ukraine. The move is aimed at helping Ukraine develop its own production capability for long-range weapons. Scalp is the French version of the British-French Storm Shadow missile, a precision weapon designed for deep strikes. The announcement came during British Prime Minister Andy Burnham's visit to Kyiv, his first overseas trip as Prime Minister. Britain has also signed a defense partnership with Ukraine focused on artificial intelligence and battlefield technology. For Kyiv, the cooperation could strengthen its ability to develop and produce advanced weapons domestically. For Moscow, however, the move crosses another red line. Russia has accused Britain of becoming directly involved in the conflict, and that accusation has now been followed by a warning. Andrei Fedorov, a former Russian deputy foreign minister and Kremlin advisor, has warned that British factories producing drones for Ukraine could potentially come under attack. Speaking to the BBC, Fedorov said he could not completely rule out semi-military action against Britain. He suggested there could be cyber attacks or other forms of retaliation. And when pressed on what semi-military action could mean, he pointed to factories producing drones for Ukraine. The warning is significant because it raises the possibility of the Russia-Ukraine conflict creating direct security risks for British defense facilities. London, meanwhile, has rejected Moscow's threats. Burnham has reaffirmed Britain's support for Ukraine while defending the decision to share missile technology amid growing tensions between London and Moscow. The standoff is not new. In November last year, Britain flexed its Dragonfire laser weapon after panic over Putin's alleged spy ship, Yanta, which was detected near the edge of UK waters north of Scotland. Britain had warned Russia it was prepared to deal with any incursions into its territory. Against this backdrop, the Kremlin's latest warning marks another escalation in an already dangerous war of words between Moscow and London. This is where the conflict enters potentially uncharted territory. For years, Western countries have supplied Ukraine with weapons, intelligence, and military equipment while avoiding direct confrontation with Russia. But Ukraine's growing ability to strike deep inside Russia, combined with Western assistance for long-range weapons production, is changing the equation. Moscow is warning that continued Western support could have consequences. Kyiv, meanwhile, argues that long-range capabilities are necessary to defend itself and disrupt Russian military infrastructure. And with both sides expanding the range and sophistication of their attacks, the battlefield is becoming increasingly difficult to contain. The latest developments show a war being fought on multiple fronts. Russia is targeting Ukraine's ports, logistics networks, and military infrastructure. Ukraine is striking Russian oil refineries and energy facilities. Britain is helping Ukraine strengthen its long-range missile production, and Moscow is warning that British facilities could become targets. The immediate question is whether either side can break this cycle of escalation, because the longer the attacks continue, the greater the risk that the war could spill into new territory, politically, economically, and potentially militarily. For Ukraine, the priority remains keeping its supply lines open and its defenses intact. For Russia, the objective appears to be disrupting those lifelines before critical supplies reach the front. And for Britain and its allies, the challenge is to continue supporting Kyiv without triggering a direct confrontation with Moscow. For now, There is no sign of the war slowing down. Instead, the strikes are reaching farther, the targets are becoming more strategic, and the warnings are becoming more serious. The Russia-Ukraine war is no longer just a battle over territory. It is increasingly becoming a war over supply chains, energy infrastructure, long-range weapons, and how far each side is willing to go.